it's been about a week since I've made a video, and I'm very sorry about that. That's entirely on me not realizing that my new exercise routine was going to basically kill my ability to do content to the level that I'm normally able to do. But since we are here and I've got a little bit of time, I want to go ahead and talk about a new commander. Well, not really new now. It was new when it came out, and then it took me a while to make this video. But the commander I want to talk about today is Zinnia Valley's Voice, and I'm going to go ahead and give a bit of a spoiler. There are two directions that we will be taking this deck, and by we, I don't just mean me, I also mean my collaboration partner today, Koritsuki. If you have not seen Koritsuki's channel, he is primarily a Twitch streamer who does Magic the Gathering content, but specifically Magic the Gathering gameplay content, which you know is outside of the purview of what I generally do. So if you want to go ahead and check out his channel, there will be a link in the description, and he is contributing on the other half of this deck. I will be taking care of the $15 version of the deck, and he will be taking care of an upgraded version of the deck, kind of like the Liberty Prime deck, but this time with both of us providing our voice for the deck itself. With that said, let's go ahead and talk about the commander and what all we are going to be doing with this nasty, nasty bird. Zinnia Valley's Voice is a 3-mana 1/3 commander that just costs America to come down on the board. It's got flying, so it's easier to get a Voltron win with this commander than normal, and it gets XO, where X is the number of creatures you have with a base power of 1. Also, any creature spells that you cast get Offspring, which means you can pay 2 mana to create a 1/1 token copy of that spell while it is on the stack. Oh boy, there are 1,012,000,000 ways you could take this commander, and honestly, there's way too many, quote, definitive things that you can do to make this guy absolutely busted. So instead of trying to go for the most powerful thing possible, let's go for the most fun route possible, the one that will cause our opponents to squirm. How about we choose the route that makes everybody stare at us and wondering what god we possibly could worship who would allow the things that we are choosing to do? That's right, we are going to be taking this guy in the direction of a sliver deck. I know, everybody's just entirely thrilled that yet another sliver commander exists. And once again, there is a sliver deck on my channel that does not involve a sliver commander and has a unique twist on slivers. But as for why we're doing it this way, or I'm doing it this way, Koritsuki is going a completely different route than I am with this deck. I chose slivers because slivers do one thing better than most every other tribe in Commander, and that is work really well when you have multiples of them on the board. With elves, if you have multiple Llanowar elves, that's certainly a problem for your opponents as it's a lot of mana, but all slivers are lords in some way, shape, or form. This means that having multiple slivers on the board that are granting a particular ability will stack up on each other quite well. While every tribe has its lords, merfolk probably having the second most on top of slivers, every single type of kindred strategy in Commander is a little more varied, whereas slivers are very straightforward. They just want to grant abilities to every other sliver at the same time. It's all they want to do from top to bottom. So we are going to be stacking on slivers like Blade Sliver. Let's begin with the Lords and Anthems of the deck, of which we are using 8 of them. Blade Sliver gives all slivers 1/0, and of course, as it costs 3 mana, we're really going to be paying 5 mana for this so that all of our slivers get 2/0 instead of 1/0. Battle Sliver gives all slivers 2/0, but of course, we are going to be making it 4/0. Regal Sliver gives all slivers an ability where if they enter the battlefield, all slivers you control get 1/1 until end of turn if you are the Monarch. Otherwise, you become the Monarch. So Regal Sliver gets to be a draw engine for our deck to a small degree, but this allows us to have a guaranteed win condition. So let's say there's the scenario. You drop Regal Sliver on the board and you go ahead and pay 2 mana into it, so you have 2 Regal Slivers. Now, every time you drop a sliver on the board, every sliver will get 2/2. However, If you offspring your subsequent slivers, then all of your slivers will get 4/4 on top of what other abilities they have gained from the other slivers. This can get out of hand very, very quickly and can cause your sliver board to have 12 power and toughness extra on top of what they normally have if you've got enough excess mana and are using small enough slivers. This thing is absolutely busted, but it can make math on turns a little bit difficult every now and again, so just be kind of cognizant and aware of that. Then we've got Bone Splitter Sliver, which gives all slivers 2/0, Watcher Sliver, which gives all slivers 0/2, Steel Form Sliver, which gives them all 0/1, Sinew Sliver, which gives them all 1/1, and Cleaving Sliver, which gives them all 2/0. We are definitely leaning as hard as we can into the power of these, and if you were to upgrade this deck with a bit of a more flexible budget, then you could obviously put some stronger slivers that do these kind of effects in the America colors. However, as we are limited by this being a $15 deck, we've got $1 for the commander and then about $15 for everything else, so we are about at max capacity in terms of what is available to us. However, we also want to grant keywords to our other slivers, and while granting multiple instances of most of these keywords will not do anything specifically for us, we still want to have a critical mass of slivers on the board because each of them will be benefiting from things like the Cleaving Sliver and the Bone Splitter Sliver. So we have 7 of these guys right here, beginning with the Bone Scythe Sliver, which gives all slivers double strike. Fury Sliver also gives them all double strike. Sidewinder gives them all flanking twice. Blur Sliver gives them all haste. Sentinel Sliver gives them all vigilance, Striking Sliver gives them all first strike, and Lancer Sliver also gives them all first strike. But this is not the only keyword soup we are going for, because there is a specific area for sliver evasion in here. Two-Headed Sliver gives them all Menace, Winged Sliver will give them all flying, Belligerent Sliver will give them all menace, but with different words, because this is a very special kind of menace for very special people. Then we have Shifting Sliver, which makes all slivers have basically sliver shadow. They can only be blocked by other slivers. Cloud Shredder Sliver, which gives all slivers flying and haste, and of course an actual Shadow Sliver, which gives all slivers shadow, so that they can only be blocked by other creatures with shadow. In a lot of scenarios, you might have 2 Shadow Slivers on the board, along with a couple of, say, Fury Slivers, giving them first strike, and then a couple instances of Blade Slivers and Battle Slivers, so that you've got unblockable slivers that are hitting for, that's 6 slivers with +4, +0, plus double strike, so that's 8 extra power on top of them all, and their bases are an average of 2, so what's 8 times 6 times 10? It's a big number. Big number of damage. That's what you're going to be doing, getting a lot of slivers on the board that do big numbers of damage. And remember, for every sliver that we have on the board, our commander is getting an extra bit of power as long as we have cloned those slivers, giving us access to more and more junk to mess with. They can die from all of our slivers, or they can die to Voltron damage. It honestly doesn't matter to us how our opponents fall. But that's not all. Our commander may copy our slivers, but we want more ways to copy our slivers. So in comes Reflections of Litjara. Choose a creature type, and whenever we cast a spell of that type, copy the spell. So we're going to choose slivers, so that every single time we have our slivers, well, we get Offspring 2/2. As this copies the spell and puts another instance of the spell on the stack, and as Zinnia says that she gives the spells themselves Offspring, if you've got the extra mana to spend into it, you may be getting 4 slivers per sliver, which can get out of hand very quickly. But let's make things even better. With all those sliver tokens we're creating, why don't we use Kaith, Famed Mechanist, to fabricate and populate all of those tokens? So anytime a non-token creature touches our board, we'll fabricate 1, which will create a 1/1 that our commander wants to see to get bigger. And we can also pay 2 and tap this to populate, which will let us copy any sliver token copy we have already made. So we're just going to keep cloning our lords that are lording extra abilities to all of our slivers. Can you imagine giving all slivers 16 instances of flanking? You know, for giggles. Then we have Wake the Reflections, a 1-mana sorcery that just says populate. That's all it does. It just quickly gives you an extra copy of a token. I think this is most likely going to be best used on something like your Battle Sliver to get extra instances of 2/0. However, we also need to protect our board and keep it nice and healthy, so we've also got a diffusion sliver in here, which gives all slivers effectively ward 2, and an unbreakable formation that lets us give all of our slivers indestructible, and if it's our main phase, then we can give them all a 1/1 counter and vigilance as well when we do so. Poultice Sliver gives all slivers a regenerate ability that they can trigger by tapping, and then Make a Stand gives all of our creatures 1/0 and indestructible until end of turn to keep our board nice and healthy, just in case our opponents decide to do anything stupid and funky. But what if I told you that we wanted to lean a little harder into that Voltron strategy that I mentioned before? Voltron Slivers is quite a unique deck to begin with, as we are trying to take two separate instances of what we normally would do to win a game of Commander damage or go wide damage, and we are blending them together into a wonderful, wonderful paste. So here's our win con section, and let's begin with this little guy right here, Amoeboid Changeling. This says that it's got all creature types, and it can give any creature on our board all creature types. It can also make a creature lose all creature types if we need to. So let me paint a scenario for you. We have a couple of our lording slivers, the Sinew Sliver, maybe the Regal Slivers, maybe the Battle Slivers. Pick whichever two you want for this scenario, and then multiply it by 2 again because of populate. Now, that already is a lot of damage. Let's say you've got one of your double strikey slivers on here as well. All our slivers have double strike, and all of them can't be blocked by slivers and also shadow or menace or whatever evasion you want to stack on top of flying. And then we just turn Zinnia into a sliver with that Changeling. Now, Zinnia is not only gaining XO for the number of 1 base power slivers on our board, Zinnia is also getting every single ability of every sliver that we have on the board at once. This, 99% of the time, will create a scenario where we just win. And that's not the only way we have to turn our commander into a sliver. We also have Mirror Entity, which can turn all of our creatures into slivers with whatever base power and toughness we want. That's right, whatever base power and toughness we want. If we pay 1 mana into the Mirror Entity, then all of the slivers, regardless of their base power, become base power 1/1. So our commander feeds off of that, because we're here for a fun time, not a long time. Then we have Hivestone, which will make all of our creature slivers irrespective of their country of origin. And then we have a Lava Belly Sliver, which of course we get to clone with our commander. Whenever a sliver enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to a player, and then we gain 1 life. So again, let me do this painting you a scenario. You have a Lava Belly Sliver, and you copy it with our commander. And then, of course, you copy that sliver once more with Kaith or Wake the Reflections, or, God forbid your Reflections of Littjara is on the board. Now you've got at least 3 copies of Lava Belly Sliver. Now, every time you play any sliver, you get to burn somebody for 3. But because our commander has Offspring, this means that all of our slivers are going to come down in instances of 2. So we will burn people for 6 every time we do this. And of course, if Kaith is the creature we have on board specifically, then we can keep populating every single turn, which will allow us to get more instances of Lava Belly Sliver until people basically die the same way they would to an average Aristocrats player. But on top of that, we also have McKindy Stampede, which can give all of our creatures 2/2 until end of turn. This can be used for just a quick overrun style effect for all of our creatures. They already have plenty of evasion they are giving to each other, so why not quickly lord this onto all of our creatures? It also is an MDFC, so we're not punished for running this in the deck in any way, shape, or form. That said, let's go ahead and talk about how we're going to draw into all of this nonsense. So because our commander has this Offspring lording ability to all of our other spells, we want to make sure that our draw power either benefits us for having slivers or benefits us with combat, as we are going to be having a lot of evasive combat with this deck, or we want something that does an ETB effect, an enter the battlefield ability that our commander can abuse. So focusing on that one, let's talk about Cloud Blazer. This is a 5 mana creature that gains us 2 life and draws us 2 cards, but if we populate activate it with our commander, then, or Offspring it with our commander, then we get to draw 2 extra cards. And of course, with something like Kaith or, you know, Zinnia, not Zinnia, Kaith, or Wake the Reflections, or anything like that, we can then copy that clone even further for more draw power. Muldrifter also works the same way here, but Muldrifter gets to be a little different. Muldrifter doesn't cost 5 in this deck, it costs 3, but it doesn't cost 3, it costs 5. Instead of paying 5 for it, we're going to evoke it for 3 and then pay 5 mana overall so we can Offspring it and draw 4 cards with Muldrifter, allowing us to keep the 1/1 Muldrifter and then populate that token later. On top of that, we have Riverwise Augur, which has a brainstorm effect attached to it that, of course, we can copy with our commander. Then we have a Hollowhead Sliver, which gives all of our creatures an instance of looting, discarding a card to draw a card. Capricious Sliver also says whenever a sliver deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of your library, and then you may play that card this turn. We can also clone the Capricious Sliver in this deck, allowing us to have 2 sets of Impulse Draw, a Ren's Resolve, basically, every time we punch somebody in the noggin. Homing Sliver also gives our slivers sliver cycling, so that if we have a dud sliver in our hand, we can go ahead and toss it away to give ourselves an extra chance at a better sliver. And then for combat stuff, we've got Biden of Thassa, Coastal Piracy, and Reconnaissance Mission that are all the same card as far as we are concerned. Whenever any of our slivers deal combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card. Coastal Piracy also is finally budget-friendly for decks like this, as it has been like $3 or $5 for the longest time. Thank God for Universes Beyond every now and again for reprinting important pieces. Then we have Military Intelligence, which says whenever we attack with 2 or more creatures, draw a card. I hope you know that with Offspring, we will always be attacking with 2 or more creatures. You know, minimum. And finally, we have Distant Melody. We get to choose a creature type and then draw a card for every permanent that we have that has that creature type on it. Yeah, we're just gonna be choosing slivers. We're just going to be choosing slivers. In a pinch, sometimes you can use this to just select elemental or, you know, human or whatever happens to be on the board so that you can draw 1 or 2 cards. But most of the time, you're going to want to hold on to this until you have at least 4 slivers on the board. 1 mana per draw is a very good rate of return in any Magic the Gathering. So as long as you can make that kind of math happen, Distant Melody is fantastic. That all said, let's let the world burn. I have only one regret with this deck. Aside from the terror that I am unleashing on the world, I also regret that we are not able to fit as much removal and interaction into here as possible. I was only able to dedicate 10 targeted slots and a single board wipe slot by kind of fudging the numbers a little bit to make it happen. So let's go ahead and see what we were able to come up with here with the slots provided. So let's take a look, beginning with Blade Back Sliver. This sliver has Hellbent. All slivers have, as long as you have no cards in your hand, then you can deal 1 damage to any player or planeswalker. A little bit of interaction. We can either use this to burn an opponent to death or get rid of a pesky planeswalker from a Super Friends player, which of course everybody has at least one friend who is that player, so do this to punish them accordingly. That is the only thing this is really going to be able to do, besides being a 2 mana sliver that is very easy to clone with our commander. Then of course we have Meteor Golem, because cloning Meteor Golem with our commander just makes me smile, because it burns villages down, and I don't know. The screams of the innocent make decks like this just very, very happy. Anyway, after that, we have Durgar Hedgemage. This enters the battlefield, and if we have 2 or more mountains, we can blow up an artifact. If we have 2 or more planes, we can blow up an enchantment. We can also clone this with our commander, so we can blow up potentially 4 cards for 5 mana, which is a very good rate of return. Then we have Rip Apart, which can either deal 3 damage to a creature or a planeswalker, or blow up an artifact or enchantment. That is 4 different types of removal in a single card. The only downside of it is a sorcery. Then we have Resculpt, which can exile an artifact or a creature to give somebody a blue and red elemental we don't really care about. Then we have Generous Gift to blow up any permanent, including a land, which can get us out of very sticky situations. Space Marine Devastator has squads, so even if our commander isn't on the board, we can use this to get rid of pesky cards like Boldus' Citadel and Doubling Season off of our opponent's boards. And then we have Jeskai Charm, which can either put a creature on top of its owner's library, a good way to get around indestructible, or 4 damage to an opponent to dome somebody for the end of the game, or give all of our creatures 1/1 and lifelink until end of turn. You know, because giving the Spawn of Satan more keywords is just fantastic. Then we have Negate to counter any non-creature spell that would come our way. Typically save this for a board wipe because that is what people are going to do to us. Then we have Constricting Sliver. Slivers we control have, when this creature enters the battlefield, we can exile any creature an opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. Having multiple copies of this effect is just kind of god fucking nasty. And honestly, if you get this one out early, you can basically turn the game off for every other person who is playing. But we also have a singular board wipe in my favorite Undo Inversion. This is seriously one of my favorite board wipes in all of Magic because, of course, it is an MDFC, so it is a free slot for us 9 times out of 10. It comes into play tapped if we need it to, but otherwise we're going to use this to blow up all non-land permanents. We are mostly a creature deck, so we will not suffer super hard from casting this outside of losing some important creatures, but we should be able to build up decently well, as we are not the lowest to the ground we could be. We would need a higher budget to make that work, but we are low enough to the ground that we can rebuild fairly easily. With that all said, though, that's how we are going to be stopping our opponents from winning the game. How are we going to ramp up to some of our mid-rangey expensive spells? Well, now, the ramp section for this is kind of evenly divided between 2 kinds of ramp. Your standard mana rocks that are all lower cost than the commander, a single utility rock which costs about the same but still helps us get to some larger spells and gives us a good way to stop things, and of course some creature ETBs. But at our price point, the ones we have to use are actually higher cost than our commander, which is a little awkward until you remember that we want them to come out after our commander anyway, because otherwise the Offspring ability wouldn't work. So let's begin with one of those in Core Cartographer. Touches the board, grab a plains out of your deck and put on the battlefield. Any plains at all, so just grab a dual land with this and drop it on the battlefield and be super happy. Solemn Simulacrum can grab any basic land and put it on the battlefield. Also, when it dies, you can draw a card. Both of these are ETB effects, so we can double them up with our commander. Then, of course, in the 2 mana rocks section, Ornithopter of Paradise is clonable with our commander, which is super nice. Azorius Signet, Arcane Signet, Talisman of Conviction, and Izzet Signet are all basic 2 mana rocks. Wayfarer's Bauble can grab any basic land from our deck if we need, and of course, Honored Heirloom is the rainbow rock that can go in most every deck. We can exile a card from a graveyard at instant speed later in the game, and of course, we can add a mana of any color with this. This should mean that even though we have a lower amount of interaction in our deck than I am typically comfortable with, we should be able to hit all avenues that matter. We can get rid of creatures, even ones that are indestructible, even ones that have hexproof. We can get rid of graveyard things, artifacts, enchantments, and we have specific planeswalker removal. And of course, we have enough ways to engage in player removal. Every type of removal, including a little bit of land removal, is accounted for in our package. Then we have Charitable Levy. Non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. Of course, this is going to slow all of our opponents down. It also replaces itself after the 3rd spell is cast by letting us draw a card and grab any plains, yes, any plains, even a non-basic plains, and drop it on the battlefield tapped. It is slightly slower ramp than most other things, but remember, if you play this down early enough, most everybody is dropping mana rocks on the board anyway, and those are non-creature spells. Disrupting our opponent's ramp with this can help us make up for the fact that we are a budget deck, and we are going to technically be a little slower than our opponents, so we need to slow them down just a smidge. But after that, we've got some lands. We have a few basics, 16 in fact, 5 islands, 5 swamps, and 6 plains, as we are leaning far heavier into white mana than our other colors. Then we have Sky Cloud Expanse, Prairie Stream, Port Town, Sacred Peaks, Azorius Chancery, Izzet Boilerworks, Frostboil Snarl, Fury Calm Snarl, and Boros Garrison as our dual lands. We've picked basically all of these for a couple of reasons. The Boros, Garrison, Boilerworks, and Port Town are bounce lands, so they can help us get back utility lands or MDFCs. Prairie Stream is super easy to justify, as it is a non-tapped dual land that is searchable. Sacred Peaks is a dual land that is searchable while being tapped, and as much as I would have liked to put in the is it dual land that is searchable, we have no way to search mountains out of the deck, or plain or islands, so only the plains searchables are important to our build. Skycloud Expanse happens to be a filter land that comes into play untapped. The Snarls can come into play untapped because we have a high amount of basic lands in the deck to justify them, and that basically does it for those lands. For our fetching lands, we've got Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, and Escape Tunnel. They are all copies of the exact same card. They are all Evolving Wilds. Crack them, get a basic land, and go to town. Promising Vein and Shire Terrace are also the same card. Crack them, get a basic land if you pay 1 mana into them, or they get to be untapped lands, which is very important if you are playing a budget deck. Everybody else gets shock lands, so we need to have a way to be flexible in the face of that. And then finally, we are a 3-mana deck, so we get to have Perilous Landscape. It is a colorless land 9 times out of 10, or we can sacrifice it to get any of the lands out of our deck that we need, or we can cycle it to draw a card if we are desperate and flooded. Then we have the Omni lands of Exotic Orchard and Command Tower with a singular utility land in Pit of Offerings, which lets us get rid of cards in graveyards and also gives us the ability to add mana of any color for the cards that we get rid of in those graveyards, giving us both mana flexibility and a little more interaction in the other packages of the deck where we are able to slot it in. And typically this is where I would segue into the upgrade section and say, if you had a little bit more money, what would you do with that money when you are trying to upgrade the deck? But I'm not going to be doing that because I'm very lazy today. So instead of doing that, I'm going to be handing you off to Korowitsuki, who is going to explain his version of the deck, which is budgetless and has much more flexibility in what options there are. Oh, it's also a completely different version of the deck, so this is 2 videos in 1. Good on you. Anyway, let's go ahead and hand things off.
Bloomburrow as a set is very awesome and very good. I think it's one of the most thematic and like eye-catching and maybe like easy to latch onto sets that WotC has made in years, right? Or at least a very, very long time. Every level of the cards in them, from like the top down, you know, like the name, the art, the creature type, the abilities, the color, all of that like together really blend into making just like a really, really fun and powerful and engaging set. And I can't give more praise to the Bloomburrow main set for how like on theme it was. However, the commander decks leave too much to be desired. If you kind of take a look at the original, so if you look at this right here, right, it's like, you know, you have Zinnia, Valley's Voice, you know, this bird bard singing tales and stories of heroism, and, you know, gives all, 1/3 bird with flying, right? It gets plus XO, where X is the number of creatures you control with base power 1, right? So you can have the creatures get buffed with counters and anthems and all that stuff, but the base power is 1. So Zinnia is drawing strength from, I don't know, the offspring that he's telling stories to. I don't know. But creature spells you control have offspring for 2. So that means that you get a copy of that card, of the creature card, but it's a 1/1, a base power 1/1. That's the only difference. Everything else is the same. So you're like, okay, cool. Like Bloomburrow was, you know, all these critters and all this cool stuff, and then, oh, like neat, Elspeth as like a mouse, as if, you know, as if Elspeth ever visited Bloomburrow. Here's like a what if she'd be a mouse. That's awesome. Love it. And then you start to look at the deck, and you're like, okay, a human wizard. Sure, I get it. You know, if there's you pay offspring for 2 more, you get a human wizard that can like maybe draw you 2 cards and have 2 bodies, or bounce 2 permanents, or make 2 1/1 birds. Okay, like I get it. I get why this card is in here. For 5 mana, this card just becomes that much better. Oh, look, an Offspring card. Okay, so at least there's some overlap from the set into the commander deck. I hope that there's a lot more. The past couple commander decks we've had have felt very on theme for the plane that they are. Let's keep it going. Angel of the Ruins. Okay. I mean, that's like a lot of mana. That's 9 mana to get rid of 4 artifacts and enchantments. So that's a bit, but like, I get it. Oh, cool. Arthur, Marigold Knight. You know, it's a mouse that comes in and swings, and you get to look at your top cards and put a creature into play tapped and attacking. Oh, cool. And then bounces back. You can Offspring it again. Awesome. That's a little on theme. Okay, I get it. Blade Splicer. Phyrexian Human Artificer. Right next to your Bloomburrow cards. I get it, you know, for 2 additional mana, you make 2 more 3/3s with first strike, like, okay. But the theme of everything is just like so off. You go from this happy bird bard man to just like this Phyrexian woman whose body has been amputated to fit more claws on. You know, like, that's just not the vibe, you know? It's just not the vibe. And on top of it, you know, like, they have cards like Curiosity Crafter, right? A bird wizard. That's the same art that it had back in Strixhaven, right? This is the exact same art. So it's not even like they necessarily changed the art of creatures that are a bit more fitting to the set with like Bird Wizard, right? This card fits right into Bloomburrow, but the art's no different. You have like a Devil Warrior, you know, okay, a Hanged Executioner, interesting. Illusionary Ambusher, man, there's cat illusions. I mean, there's cats on Bloomburrow. They're like Calamity Beasts. An illusion of a Calamity Beast seems like it would be, you know, pretty scary. That would be pretty interesting to have depicted on the art. Nope, it's just still attacking a random human. Here's our Inferno Titan. So, all's to say that the set itself does not have a lot of animal-based theming that feels very conducive to Bloomburrow. And none of the art for the creatures is new either. Like, Cephalid Broker is an octopus now, because the cephalids have turned from cephalid to octopus. No new art. Okay, kind of strange. Solemn Simulacrum, you know, like a golem that changes art styles all the time based on the different planes and environments that people build them in. Here's just like the default art for it, not like a Bloomburrow style, you know, maybe made with like wood chips instead, you know. Just no really new art. Charter Course got new art. Cool, I guess. Charter Course, sure, you know. Cut a Deal has beautiful new art. Cool. I wish that happened to any single creature that made it feel like Bloomburrow. So, regardless, Sullen by the Fae is an awful card. My goal was to try to find a way to make this deck list feel more like it comes from Bloomburrow versus just kind of the smattering of cards that they gave us. They gave us good cards that want to be Offsprung. That is true. But at the cost of the deck not feeling like Bloomburrow in the slightest. So, my goal was to set out to do that as much as I could. I still want to have a good deck. I still want a deck that's like doing a thing. But there's a lot of ways to do that in Magic. To have a deck that's like doing the thing, but not necessarily like, you know, peak pinnacle tier. So, welcome to Kuro Hitsuki's Zinnia Valley's voice deck. The theme is Bloomburrow, and we're kind of gonna try to nail that theme. First up, we have Aerial Extortionist. Hey, look, a bird soldier doing bird things, right? Enters the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player. Exile up to 1 target non-land permanent. For as long as that card remains exiled, this opponent may cast it. Whenever a player casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. Man, imagine. This is already good at 5. But for an extra 2, I'm removing 2 non-land permanents and drawing 2 cards when my opponents want to cast them again. You see what I'm doing here? You see that the theme very much stays on point. There's going to be some deviation, but you see what I'm doing here, right? So Air Extortionist, great removal. Agate Instigator, freaking awesome. Aven Interrupter, countering more or less like stopping a spell on the stack, making it cost 2 more for my opponents to cast. Oh, what if I have 2 of them? Now it costs 4 more. Aven Wing Guide, for all of the Offspring tokens that I'm making, they will now have flying and vigilance. Cool. Cartographer's Hawk, deals combat damage to the player, get a land, play it again. Offspring, get 2 more lands, play it again, etc. Kaith, Famed Mechanist, yeah, sure, she's a human, or a dwarf artificer, right? But Fabricate 1 on all of my non-token creatures is pretty dope, actually, because now I'm able to just go like, okay, I'll play this creature, I'll Offspring it, sure, but now I also get a 1/1 with it that increases Zinnia's power even more, and I can also pay 2 and tap to populate the token that I made of the original card. Kaith is freaking amazing here. Curiosity Crafter is still here. Defiler of Faith is a Phyrexian. I get you. Okay. But when I pay if I pay 2 life to reduce the white pip of a creature I control, no, it costs cheaper. And if it's a white permanent, I do get a 1/1 soldier, which further increases Zinnia's power. This I feel is like the furthest deviation in a way, but it just fits well. Donal, Herald of Wings. I make 1/1 spirit copies of creatures that I play, which is, again, fitting with Zinnia. Eyesore, making Zinnia harder to kill. Esper Sentinel, having 2 of him is cool. You know, I'm not fully, diving into everything, because there's nothing like Esper Sentinel that's not a human artifact creature soldier, but hey, listen, 3 mana to draw 3 cards every time my opponent farts is like pretty cool. Fairy Mastermind, getting 2 of these, an opponent draws a 2nd card for turn, draw a card, fantastic, right? Glasspool Mimic. The thing to note about Glasspool Mimic is that when you cast it with Offspring is kind of like a delayed trigger. It says you may pay 2 as you cast it, and when it enters the battlefield, you make a token copy of it. So I'm going to pay 3 and then an additional 2 on the Glasspool Mimic. Glasspool Mimic will enter as a copy of something on the field, and then Offspring will like delay trigger, and I will make a copy, like a 1/1 copy of the thing that Glasspool Mimic became. Guardian Scale Lord, being able to have 2 Guardian Scale Lords to bring back multiple permanents is really freaking strong. It's really freaking great. Illustrious Wanderglyph, having, one, it gets me a bunch of 1/1s every turn, which Zinnia loves, and having 2 of Illustrious Wanderglyph is just that much better for me. Imperial Recruiter, getting 2 of him is also great, but being able to tutor up all of these small creatures from my deck with 2 power or less is like kind of a huge deal, actually. So Imperial Recruiter is the play. Jackdaw Savior, Jacked Rabbit, Ledger Shredder, Mockingbird, which I gotta pick up. Nesting Dovehawk. I don't know why it wasn't reprinted in this deck. The fact that it wasn't reprinted here is honestly pretty wild. Ornithopter of Paradise. I need mana. Phantasmal Image. Now I get 2 of something. Pinnacle Monk is just a land on the back. Polywog Prodigy is really, really good. Rapid Augmenter is actually going to be a card that wins me most games. Rose Room Treasure, having 2 of this, it gives me up to 4 treasures a turn. Rumor Gatherer, she's talking to animals. It's adorable. She'll draw me cards. Offspring immediately triggers a draw on her. Selfless Spirit, having 2 of those is good. Sealburg Champion from another deck. For some reason, Offspring cards were in other Precon decks and not the Offspring deck, but whatever. The Trainer will help me get more cards. Trumpeting Connoisseur Offspring is adorable. Warren Warleader, very good. Wingmate Rock is honestly the first card that I thought of when I was saying like, hey, how can I make this deck? Like, what cards could they have put in here that makes it more on theme? Wingmate Rock was the first thing I thought of. You swing with something and then you pay, sure, it's 7, but you put in 4 cards. Amazing. Witch Enchanter, it's a land on the backside, right? And then Witty Roastmaster is fitting in more with getting 2 Witty Roastmasters for 5 is pretty good. Blasphemous Act, there's gonna be a lot of creatures. Amario's Call, Girad's Belligerence, being able to populate a bunch of the things I have, Jessica's Will, Storm of Souls lets me resurrect my whole board as 1/1s, which Zinnia will love, Achroma's Will to just kind of help push in there, removal with Chaos Warp, Clever Concealment. I'm going to have a lot of creatures, and a lot of them will be tokens, so I do need to just phase them out. Fierce Guardianship to counter things, Generous Gift, I'll gift them an elephant, that's adorable, right? It's a land. Mana Drain, I need a place to put a Mana Drain that I have. Being able to have the Offspring mechanic kind of like paid for with the Mana Drain is really good. Pongify and Rabbit Hybridization, Swan Song, a bird in these trying times, Swords of Plowshares, Valakut Awakening, and Wear and Tear. Arcane Signet, Azorius Signet, Abidance of Thassa. I'm going to have a lot of creatures. More creatures than not too many, not a billion of them, but like a decent amount, and they'll have flying a lot of the time. So I will have some heavy draw off of Bident of Thassa. Boros Signet, Cursed Mirror is fine. Felwar Stone, Oketra's Monument. White spells cost 1 less, which is fine. That helps me pay for Offspring better. And whenever I cast any creature spell, I am also making a 1/1 that Zinnia will get stronger by. Soul Ring, Talisman. So that's the Mana Rock package there. Enchantments, we didn't go super heavy on the like getting double of the tokens that you put into play. I could have put, every single white, get double tokens, get triple tokens, get quadruple tokens. I could have. I didn't want to, that's not entirely the deck that I want to do. I would rather have more creatures that I want to Offspring and double versus just having like a couple lesser of those cards, but making sure I have like 50 of those copies, right? I just didn't want to. But 1 Anointed Procession, 4 mana enchantment is, I think, like pretty reasonable just to make Offspring that much better. Charitable Levy. My earliest casts are pretty much either going to be Mana Rocks or just creatures with Offspring, so this will slow things down for my opponents. Determined Iteration. At the beginning of my combat, I populate, and the populate creature has haste, and then sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step, so that gives me a lot of time with these Offspring cards. Echoing Assault, which is kind of already in the deck, basically another form of Determined Iteration. Mystic Remora will just kind of keep me drawing, and of course we use this art because there's a fish on it. There are many other arts. This one has a fish on it. Rabble Rousing, it's probably one of my least favorite, okay, this is definitely not on theme at all cards, but it's one of the best token making things in existence, and it makes a bunch of 1/1s that will definitely make my commander one-shot people. I will just one-shot people with Zinnia. Because of Rabble Rousing. But, hey, it is what it is. And then Warleader's Call. I do have creatures entering the battlefield. I don't have a million creatures entering the battlefield, right? But creatures I control do get +1/+1, and I do get to ping everyone as more and more things come into play. So I do like all of that. We do have 28 lands, which is really low. We do have 4 MDFCs, and I do plan on the MDFCs being used as lands more often than not, but the lands themselves are pretty decent. They're getting me exactly what I need to get, and I do have Mana Rocks in here, and actually there's supposed to be the bunny that looks for lands when people have more lands than you in here as well. Either way, that's my Zinnia list, where I think it definitely kind of fits more of the Bloomburrow theme than certainly things did before. Certainly the original version of the deck by far. I either tried to get just non-humans, certainly non-humans is kind of the main squeeze. And then, hey, at least have them either do something really, really good with the Offspring, or at the very least be kind of thematic with, talking to animals and whatnot. And Imperial Cruiser just gets my entire deck. But yeah, that's what we got going on. So I'll be testing it out this week by quite a bit. I definitely, the mana base could be tooled around with maybe just a little bit more, but knowing that I do need to basically pay 2 more on everything with Offspring just to make sure I get even more out of it, it definitely makes me, have to think about how much land I'm getting. So But yeah, this is a pretty decent deck. I'm liking it. You know, I'm liking it, and I can't wait to put it fully together. So, all right, deuces. Thank you very much. This was Kurohitsuki's Zinnia, the Valley's Voice.
Thank you very much, Kurohitsuki, for your version of the deck. I greatly appreciate it. If y'all want to go check out his channel, please go to the description below and go ahead and give him a follow and also maybe a sub, because supporting content creators is, you know, a good thing every now and again. We do like having money for food and drinks and Magic the Gathering cards once in a while. That all said, I do find it very interesting how when both of us looked at this particular commander, we saw two completely different decks in mind. He saw a deck that was very on theme to the Bloomborough vibe of no humans, just as many furry critters as possible, and in some cases scaly critters, whereas I looked at it and said, actually, this would make a really good Kindred deck. Let's make Slivers broken again. And I think both versions of this deck will work out very, very well. But obviously, if you want to check them out, go to the description below. There will be links to both of our decks there for you to try out for yourself. Moxfield does have a trying button where you can just test out the hands of a deck and see how it plays for you. If you feel like either of our land bases or removal bases or anything like that needs some tweaking, then hell, maybe let me know in the comment section below here. What would you do with Zinnia? She feels like a very, very flexible commander, and I think there's about, like I said, 1,012 ways you could take her that would all work out perfectly well. That said, let me know what you guys thought in the comment section below. Please follow the both of us and hit all of our socials as you will. And as always, everyone, if you want to suggest a deck or anything like that, drop it into the comment section below and insert into video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Briskreek, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravelern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Mark Anthony, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.